Welcome to Heal the World Show podcast, brought to you by the Healing Institute. The Healing Institute is a online worldwide hub of holistic practitioners, and we are making a difference in the world. I'm Parmelia Parham. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Healing Institute. And I created the Healing Institute because I'm really passionate about us having a proactive wellness society. I believe we've been a reactive illness society too long. It's time for us to be proactive. And we want to bring people hope. We actually are bringing people hope, giving people hope that there are ways to be well and stay well on their health journey that perhaps they haven't tried before. But I'm just so excited to the fact that our practitioners on the Healing Institute, they are all looking for the root cause of what might be the issue with you. So it's not they're not just they're not just treating the symptoms, they're actually looking for why. Why are those symptoms showing up? And so I have been using holistic practices and that kind of healing for well over 20 years. And I know that it works personally for myself because I have been using it. So you might be wondering why this is so important to me. And I just want to let you know we did have a tragedy in our family a number of years ago. My mom passed away at age 61, right before Christmas, December 15th. I was 5 months pregnant with my son, and it was due to a complication with her kidneys because she'd been on a medication for a very long time. Not once did her doctor at the time ever tell her that there was side effects to this medication, especially if you were on it for a long period of time. So it happened very quickly, very suddenly. She was in the hospital, and within a week she was gone. And not only was it a tragedy that she died so young, but my children didn't get to meet their grandmother. They didn't get to know this woman. And I don't want that happening for any other families. So that's why this is really very, very important to me. Important for us to have education and to know the different types of healing that we have. And that's what we do on the podcast. We have a guest co host. And today I'm very excited to have Amy Vogel with us. She's a spiritual storyteller and a story coach. And we're telling your story and how that is actually, it is a healing modality to be able to do that. So welcome, Amy. So happy to have you here today with us.
I'm so excited to be here. We've been planning this for a little while, so we finally made it happen.
Yes, definitely. So I'm just going to run this little ticker tape here. We haven't hopped onto the chat yet, so I'm not sure if anybody's joined us, but we will do that. And also just to let people know, if you don't get into the chat, sometimes that happens. I'm not always sure why. But Amy and I will go back through the event after the event and go through the chat, and we will answer all your questions and we will connect with you. So tell us, tell us, Amy, just exactly what is a spiritual storyteller?
Well, first of all, I see there is Marie Piklovic in the chat. So
Yes.
I want to good morning, Marie. And so a spiritual storyteller. Well, I've been I was unwittingly telling stories my whole life, whether that was stories to myself, to my children. I was in ministry in a church here in Houston, Texas for 10 years. I was in sales, and a good salesperson is a natural storyteller. I always loved to read. And so in the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to launch my own business, and every story that I tell has some kind of spiritual component to it because that's who I am. So I say spiritual storyteller because that is an essential piece of who I am, of who we all are, is our spiritual side, and that affects our physical, it affects our emotions. And so when you tell a story that resonates in or you hear a story that resonates in your spirit, something happens. Transformation becomes possible. And so when I say I'm a spiritual storyteller, it's because I like to tap into that deep part of who we are. And I like those deep parts of me to come to the forefront. So that's what I help in my coaching practice, as well as I help people tap into that depth, find their voice, and be empowered to tell their own story that will most certainly impact the world for the better.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, that's beautiful. Um, I I think too, sometimes we don't always connect that it's our spiritual side. Some people don't want to embrace that for whatever reason,
Right.
and that's fair. There's no judgment, but I think we can also, if we're feeling it in our heart, and we're
Mhm.
feeling it. I always talk to my clients about what their emotions are and how they're feeling them and how their body is reacting, and I think that is all encompasses our heart, our spirit, how we influence a lot about their
Mhm.
auras, and that is
Mhm.
really who we are. That's our essence of who we are, which is spirit. And
Yeah.
we
Right.
don't always call it that, but I
Right.
certainly believe that too. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So I do want to recognize Marie because she's here today. She is one of our practitioners on the site. Um, she's actually helping women who are in midlife, who are
Mhm.
finding that they are having challenges. And also, she's an amazing breathing facilitator. So,
Mhm.
so happy to see you here, Marie. This today, she always has great questions too. So, not putting you on
Yay.
the spot, Marie, but all right. So tell us maybe a little bit some of the clients that you work with, that you're coaching with their stories. If you have, our audience always likes to know some of the results. If they were working with you, what
Of
could they
course.
expect?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a couple of clients that I'm working with now. I focus primarily on working with women. And like Marie, there seems to be an influx of women in their midlife who are not only wanting to tell their stories, but wanting to use what they've been through, the wisdom that they've gained,
Mhm.
not only through hardship, but through those transformative experiences, good and bad. And often the bad leads to the good, and really the bad is undercover good, if you want to go that route. But working with several women right now who really feel led isn't the right word, called isn't the right word, but almost pushed. They're so passionate about what they've been through and how
Mhm.
to tell their story. And so, what I do is I help them craft their manuscript in a way that a reader can follow. So, there's one thing to write a blog, to write a stream of consciousness. It's another to have a progressive story that takes the reader through not only your own um, journey of transformation. And oftentimes it's connected back to their own coaching practices or even if somebody's writing a memoir, you're going to be telling part of who you are. You're going to be
Right.
sharing and
Of
showing parts
course.
of yourself. Yeah. But really, it's casting this vision. And I think this is such um, an exciting time for women because our voices not only are able to be heard, we're owning that
Yeah.
power. And
Yeah.
so and it's these are the voices that we need to, because for so long um, it's just been one kind of voice, and we see where that's gotten us. So helping these women craft their vision, their mission, not only to make their books, their blogs, their content um, potentially earn money for them and get ROI back from them, but really take what they're feeling in their heart and send it out into the world in such a way that people can see themselves in their stories,
Mhm.
and they can therefore grasp hold of that to own their own transformation in their life.
And I think that is so perfect because oftentimes when you meet someone and you just talk about, okay, well, this is my experience or that was my experience, you can kind of see the other person's eyes light up because
Yep.
they can identify with that, what that is. We've all had our personal stories of transformation,
Yep.
and for us to be able to share it and let other people know. And oftentimes when you're in that transformation process, I don't know about you, but certainly when I thought I was by myself. I thought I was
Yep.
completely
Oh,
alone.
yeah.
And then when I was able to meet other people who were also going through that, that was such a help because it really gave me the courage to continue on,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I wanted to be coming from a happier place than
Yes,
where I started
absolutely.
from, right? So
Absolutely.
I think that's great when women especially are explaining what their transformation was, whatever it might be. It could be completely different from anybody else's, but just the
Right.
fact that they're sharing it, that they're
Yep.
sharing that transformation is so important. So
Right.
Marie has a question about you, or so you help writers, whether they're what's a blog or a book,
Yeah.
um, regardless
That's
of
why I
the
make
writing.
that's why I make the differentiation between story coaching and book coaching, because
Mm,
I don't just help people write books. That's primarily my business, or at least that's the clients that I have right now. But there are so many different ways to tell a story. I've had my own podcast, so I know how to help people create content for podcasts. I do a lot of my own content creation on social media. It's all a story.
yeah.
If it's going to be appealing, if it's going to be, and not just appealing in the sense of, like traditional marketing, but people are going to connect with it. It has to be something that's authentic and relatable and from the heart. And studies show that we remember story
Yes.
22% more than we remember just straight facts.
Yeah.
And often, if you think about the facts that you heard it in a story.
Yeah.
Somebody was
Absolutely.
telling you
Yeah.
their story and they included this factual information.
Yeah.
And this is interesting too, given we're talking about healing. Um, the the reality is that we have found the cure for addiction. The neural pathways that are created when we are, addicted to alcohol or drugs or any other ism, as you would call it. When we have that disease, the cure for it is connection, because the
Yes.
connection with another person stimulates those same chemicals, those same neural
Yes.
pathways, as and it's it's have to be repeatable, just like an addiction is. But that's why organizations like AA and NA and other organizations like that are so powerful, is because they're providing a healthy connectional pathway. And what happens is you're telling stories in those rooms.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that's what keeps people sober. That's what keeps people on the path of recovery. That's what keeps people moving forward. And I'd venture to guess that in your clients and in your practitioners' clients, they're coming in with an internal story that they believe, that their mind has latched onto, that their spirit is a part of. And that's what's keeping them stuck. And so when that shift happens,
I
that shift
know.
in perspective,
Hmm. Yeah.
that's when the healing starts to take place. It
And
starts to
it's
take root.
it's so powerful and it's so magical. And you
It
can
is.
just see your clients' eyes changing, the information and their being. So I
Yes.
want to recognize Leslie Flowers.
Mhm.
Welcome, Leslie. Leslie was the my coach last year when we were getting this podcast up and running. So I'm so delighted that you're here today. And she has just finished her 10th book, and it's her first fiction.
It's awesome.
So put the name of your book in the chat,
Yes,
Leslie.
please.
So we want to go to Amazon and get that for sure.
Absolutely.
And
I
she's
I wrote 2 nonfiction books before I released my first fiction book in January of this year. So
beautiful. Yes.
exciting.
Okay. Well, we're all aligned here. It's great.
Yes.
Um, oh, and Marie says she's just finished reading Leslie's book. So fabulous. Yes. Uh, I'm just. Oh yeah. Leslie said she's loves that we're hosting this and this topic and this discussion today. And let's see. Marie's got a question for, say, a bio or a speaking intro. How long is the story that might be the best received? So I guess if you're on a platform and you're
Mhm.
speaking, to keep your audience's attention, I'm kind of reading through the lines as to
Yeah.
that's what Marie means. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the shorter the better. So it needs to be concise, because people start to tune out after 90 seconds unless they're engaged. So you've got to use keywords, you've got to use, your voice inflection. Speaking softer helps, especially if you've got you use different volumes. That kind of clues people in. But in general, if you're doing some sort of introduction, the shorter, the funnier, the better.
Yeah. Humor is always great to do as part
Yeah.
of your
Yeah.
introduction.
I
And
had a
Leslie's given us the name
speaking.
of her book. It's called The
Oh,
Possibility of
yeah.
Errata. So
Right.
that'll be exciting too. to order that for sure. Yes, I think that's so important. And we're talking about using our voice
Mhm.
today and storytelling, but there's so many different types, right? There's so many different
Mhm.
types of storytelling. We could be telling a story in a blog, or we could be
Yeah.
telling a story when we're being interviewed on a podcast.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
could be telling a story um, when we're doing a presentation of some kind. And
Yep.
certainly, we now know the statistics are in, the more you tell a story, the more people will remember what you're saying. So as long as you
Absolutely.
can weave your message into the story, and even a personal story,
Mhm.
um, people will remember.
Well, even a visual story, and that's what has
Mhm.
captured. That's what I love about the internet. That's what I love about social media, is because in a second, you see a visual, you see a meme, you see a short video, they're telling a story. And then
Yes.
you go and forward that to your friends because you want to share the story because it's funny, it's spoken to you, it stirs up passion in you, something.
Mhm.
And that is what is so powerful about it. But stories being used by everybody, for good or for evil, it's being used, and that's why um, it is the most powerful form of communication, and why it is something that we pass down through the millennia, the
Mhm.
generations, is because we remember story, oral retelling of histories, of myths, of nursery rhymes explaining. I mean, my mom and I have talked about this so many times that my kids say nursery rhymes her grandparents said. It just
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
they stay with us even long after the underlying truth of the story has been lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our indigenous communities have passed down stories
Mm.
because they didn't, necessarily have a written language back in, many years ago,
Yeah.
many generations ago. And it was all verbal, and it was always told to, the younger generations so that they would remember, and also had something, it was a way of life. It was looking at values and looking at how life should be lived, for the best, for the better. So I think it's so very important for us to recognize that, and
Mhm.
to embrace it and say, yes, okay, storytelling very important, and definitely to
Yeah,
include something personal about yourself, that because
absolutely.
then people will remember.
Yeah. And realize the story you're telling yourself. In fact, this is something that I'm actively working on, and recognizing with my clients, and always with myself too, is that I have to recognize the stories that I'm telling myself, and if those are helping me or they are holding me back. And so, in the larger scheme of things, when we're consuming information, when we're consuming stories, we have to look at, is this helping me become who I'm supposed to be, or is this holding me back, or making me small, or making me angry, and look at other people in a way that is very, very negative, and holding them back. So, stories are everywhere. And once you start seeing it, they're going to pop up like when you start looking for buses. Yeah,
Or that red car.
yeah,
You're going to see the red car every time.
yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and I love the way you said that, because oftentimes we have these stories we've grown up with, which might be a belief that
Hmm.
really is not serving us anymore.
Right.
So you mentioned earlier about the neural pathways in our brain, and how we have to recognize that we can change those with our
Absolutely.
thoughts and our beliefs. We can actually change those neural pathways. And I know this is a
Mhm.
subject that Leslie loves, because we covered it in her course, and really, yeah, such it's so powerful, and
Mhm.
especially when you realize you can do it, that
Yeah.
they're not stopped, they're whatever these beliefs might be, or whatever the stories are that you grew up with. Once you recognize that, you know what, that doesn't fit for me anymore,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just doesn't work for me anymore, And I'll share one. I was raised, my grandmother that I'm named after, so we had, a lot of synergy. She believed that, if you were wealthy, you were greedy, and you could be cruel,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it wasn't really a subject that we talked about a lot, but it was there, right? It was kind of in the ether. And
Yep.
so then, as I'm getting into business, and I'm like, I'm meeting some pretty amazing people that are quite wealthy, and
Mhm.
they're not greedy at all. So
Right.
that was like a paradigm shift that I had to make, and to look at that sort of belief that my grandmother had, that
Mhm.
wasn't fitting for me anymore.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, um, I grew up with parents who had parents who grew up in the Great Depression.
Mhm. Yeah.
And they grew up in poverty. And so while they did a lot of work, there's still a lot of worry around money. And so it's taken a lot of work for me to recognize the stories that I grew up with. And even one came up this week where it was just this, I was a little uncomfortable, I was a little unstable, and I realized it was my inner child walking through the grocery store and getting these confusing messages of, we can get this but we can't get that, and we
Mm.
can do this but we can't do that. And so it was the inconsistency that started a story in me that money is confusing. And
Mhm.
so if I'm going to have money, I need to, it's going to confuse me and I'm not going to know what to do with it. And so I had to work through that story to say, oh, no, 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 I'm actually pretty good with money. I actually know that it's an energy and it has it needs a purpose. And so I'm going to work with it. So, money is something that's been coming up for a lot of people lately, and
Yes.
especially women too. It's like we're coming
Mhm.
out of there's a lot of convergence of different fields. You mentioned neuroscience. You mentioned, I mean, I'm in the arts technically, right? You mentioned healing, spirituality. Everything is kind of coming to a convergence. And I think we as women are leading the way in that. And because we're communal, is when we go up, we bring everybody else up with
Mhm.
us.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with you. We're pioneers. Just like our grandparents were pioneers if they were farmers, which my grandparents were farmers, so they were
Right.
pioneers. But we're pioneers in a different way, and I really truly believe women are pioneers, because especially around money, because for the longest time, my mother's greatest wish was for me to get married, and a man would look after me. My husband would look after me, so I would have to not worry about anything.
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, that didn't work. So,
Me either.
so we have been, we've been sort of conditioned that someone else will take care of us.
Yep.
Someone else will look after the money issue, or the money, whatever, not an issue necessarily, but, we'll look after the money. And so we
Oh,
don't
you
have
don't
to,
worry about that. Yeah, you
yeah,
don't
don't worry
worry.
about that. Yeah. So we don't have to take responsibility. And I think this is the sort of the new wave, if you will, of women taking their power back,
Yeah,
realizing they have the power, and they are able to make those kinds of decisions.
yeah,
And I'm so glad
and
that you mentioned about your grandparents, because I truly believe the generations that we're in right now, we still have that, the parents who, my father was in the Second World War. My grandfather was in the First World War. That, what do I want to call it? It's like the lack. It's like a feeling of lack, that we shouldn't have this because of that. And certainly my grandparents didn't have hardly any money, and didn't have, and tried to raise 12 children on the farm. And really there was that. And I think that's where my grandmother's idea of wealth came from, was
yeah,
because of course they didn't have any.
right,
They were just, luckily living on the land, so they could actually
right,
feed the family.
right,
But just the whole concept of, our generations that we have to now look at, is that part of our DNA? Is that
right.
part of our aura and our energy that we grew up with, and
Yeah,
how we can change it? Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
And Marie asked a great question that that segues from that idea. She said, how do you pull yourself out of a story, say a story that does keep you stuck? She asked for some techniques. And the first is getting quiet. You have to get quiet enough because you have so many thoughts. And I can speak from the American perspective. I mean, so many thoughts, so many, just our culture is so anxiety, not just ridden, but driven because it's go, go, go. It's grind, grind, grind. And so the counterintuitive effort, really, because this is where the effort is, of just taking 5 minutes to get quiet and asking so first technique, ask yourself the question, what am I feeling right now?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second question is, why do I think I'm feeling this way? And trusting that answer that comes. I mean, this has been a huge part of my healing process, is learning to trust myself and my inner knowing, my inner intuition. And then not just leaving it there, because then it gets open to all kinds of anxious interpretation. Write it down. So there is so much power in writing our stories. One, so we can look at it, because we are always the first people that we tell our own stories to. It is, we have to know our own story in order to be able to share it. And sometimes that comes out in processing, verbal processing. I'm a verbal processor. So, I get a lot of understanding when I'm talking to my close friends as my partner. But when I'm journaling, when I'm writing something out and I can see it on the page before me, it's almost like there's actual data now of what this story is. So it's not just me thinking, it's actually written down. And so I can do something with it. And that can be, continue to sit with it, continue to write it out more. I always feel better after I journal. Always. It may not instantly solve the problem, but I've removed some of the power of it spinning in my brain, spinning in my mind. And I know that I'm functioning in my intellect when I am so anxious and spinning. I know I'm not operating from my heart or from my spirit. But that's taken me a long time to learn. But just the actual practice of spending, and it's hard. Meditation, contemplation, whatever you want to call it, is hard, but every religion has that practice within it for a reason, because we need it. So even if you start with a minute and then you go to 5 and then you go to 10, my sweet spot for meditation is about 18 minutes. 20 minutes to me is like, I always know when it hits 18 minutes. 20 minutes is too long. So, but I'm growing in that. So, the first step would definitely be to pause, take a breath, ask myself what is going on, and then journal it out so I can get some hardcore evidence of what's actually happening. And then you can dive deeper. I mean, I've done work with internal family systems. I've been through a lot of therapy, like all of that. I've been on this healing journey, about 15 years now. But I always come back to the very basic practice of let me stop, let me pause, and then let me write it out and see what's happening. Because if I can understand the story I'm telling myself, then there is power there to change it.
Well, and I'm so glad you said that, because oftentimes we're taught, trained, we're raised. If it's fear or something we feel uncomfortable with, we either push it away, push it down, run away. We're not taught to face it. Right. And when you're actually sitting with your uncomfortableness, whatever you want to define it as, it could be fear, it could be whatever. That's what's so important. And because Marie's a conscious breathing facilitator, she knows that, sitting, being quiet, and then breathing, doing some breathing exercises, deep breathing, and all the different breathing that she's taught me to do. So, it's so very important. She says, I noticed that I seem to be more sensitive to noise lately, and I'm craving more silence, stillness, and solitude. And I think that's in relation to our busy, busy world, and we have to make that for ourselves, because our world is the way we know it right now. The world isn't going to help do with that for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say along with that, when we get sensitive, they're sensitive to noise, sensitive to light, wherever we are sensitive, it's because there's a part of us that wants to tell us the story.
Hmm.
They and because we get so busy, we don't often have the space for the parts of us that are speaking, whether they're, that's the inner child, the adolescent, the adult, the ego, the higher self, all of the parts of us, right? They don't always get the space and the time to tell the story. And
Right.
so if we create that space and ask, then again, and we write it out, we're like, oh, okay, it's not that complicated. it's
And
it's what
creating the space is being silent, right? Being silent, being still, going into that solitude. So you're giving yourself permission to then have our autonomic nervous system calm down
Yeah,
and not be in that fight or flight, which is
absolutely.
so important. Well, I
And then
can't believe we're at the end of our
I
30
know, I
minutes,
know.
but
Keep going.
I want you to be able to tell people about your event that's coming up, your workshop that's coming up.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So I have a workshop called Healing Your Spiritual Story, and it's a starter's guide to understanding how to overcome religious hurt, religious trauma. I'm a former pastor, so I've gone through quite a bit of transformation, had my own faith expanded as I've untangled from some really toxic theologies. And so I want to share not just my own journey, but create the space for people to discover their own story, because so many times we have this idea that when we get frustrated, when we get upset, when we get hurt by religion, we got to toss the baby out with the bathwater.
mm,
But there are still so many beautiful things. I came from the Christian tradition, and there's still so many things that I'm in touch with that are beautiful and provide ancient wisdom. And so, helping people figure out what they need to leave behind and then take with them in their spiritual growth story is what this workshop is about. It's September 14th, Saturday, September 14th, and it's going to be on Zoom from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. And they can find more about it on my website, amywvogel.com, and under events. They can buy tickets there too.
and I'm just letting everybody know how to connect with you. So it's
Yes.
info@amywvogel.com, so
Yep.
they can ask you more questions. That's beautiful. Yes, I love that. And oftentimes, we need to keep those pieces that still support us,
Yeah.
those, the support that we need,
Yeah.
and not just leave everything, and think that we have to start all anew.
Right.
So it's very important to look at that spirit and decide, okay, well, this
Yeah.
isn't fitting for me anymore, but I don't want to, this part of it still is, this part's still fitting,
Yep.
and this part's not fitting. So,
Right.
yeah. Any words of wisdom before we say goodbye, Amy, I think I cut you off a little bit earlier that you were ready to
I
tell
could,
us some more.
oh, I could just keep going, but everybody has a story that is worth telling. So start by telling it to yourself, but just start.
Yeah.
Just start discovering what your story is, and then the process of who you're to tell it to, how you're supposed to tell it, that will unfold along the journey.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So, yes, we will be going back into the chat in the event after we sign off and say goodbye today. So, any people that you weren't able to get into our chat file, oftentimes this happens, where we will still be answering your questions and connecting with you, sending you how to connect with Amy. And also, Amy, I'll get you to, we'll be able to talk about your workshop, or you can send them information about your workshop, how to sign up for
Right.
that workshop.
Yeah.
So, we're creating a vision. Our vision is to create this community of holistic practitioners, ways to be well, ways to stay well on your health journey. And so each week, when I have a guest co-host who has a healing offer. And you got to meet another fabulous woman today, Amy Vogel. So thank you so much, Amy, for being here. You know, the Healing Institute really is in service. We are in service for our practitioners and, of course, for the people that are coming to the website and connecting with our practitioners. And our motto is service with love. So we have a big ask. We'd like you to share this podcast with your audience, with your community, with your connections. Let people know that we exist, that we are here, and we are here to support everyone on their healing journey. So we'll see you next Friday